And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we dig deep into the main business and economic stories of the day. So tomorrow, the Polish Parliament will begin to debate the state budget for 2025. The most important figures are already known, including a massive deficit due to record defence spending. But less is known about how the government wants to fight the ballooning public debt. To further discuss Poland's state budget for 2025, I am now joined by Poland's former Finance Minister, Professor Paweł Wojciechowski. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us. So, Poland is one of 7 countries now under the EU excessive deficit procedure, and Poland's Finance Minister, Andrzej Domański, has one of 2 choices from Brussels to address the problem in either 4 or 7 years. And it seems that he is rather keen on the 4-year option to deal with the problem quickly and also to have less strings attached. And I wanted to hear your comments on that.
Well, he could choose the 4-year term or 7-year term. I think 4-year term shows the more determination to lower the deficit and come out from the excessive deficit procedure, which is imposed on Poland. But please remember that procedure was imposed based on the last year numbers of the previous government. So Poland is one of the 7 countries which has the procedure and has some obligations to come out and is proposing now its plan, but based on the previous numbers. So now, of course, it's still the situation in which we have accelerated growth, and you can see the growth of 3.9% in the budget. Inflation rate is a little bit on the high side of 5%. Some people say it's maybe too much, average inflation rate for next year. But it shows us definitely that optimism in the economy on the side of Minister of Finance. Maybe I would say maybe it should be a little bit more conservative. Some people say I'm on the same opinion that maybe should be more conservative. But at the same time, it shows that maybe there's more and more of EU funds coming to Poland from recovery from European funds, and of course maybe some investments. So there's a hope that we can fulfill the promise and starting from not from the next year, but afterwards, coming down with a deficit.
But Brussels will definitely want to have some sort of oversight as to how we deal with this procedure. And obviously Poland is facing some additional challenges after the floods.
Yeah, it's facing the challenges, and actually the day before the budget was submitted to the Polish Parliament, there was a one-day, on Saturday, discussion among the members how to modify the budget. So that was like self-correction of the budget before submission, and actually the funds were found in the budget from some of the reserves and put in a special reserve for the people affected for flood by about 2.2 billion. So it's altogether around 3 billion zloty to recover from the flood. In addition, we're talking about 5 billion euro promised by head of European Commission Ursula von der Leyen. So it makes all total of 23 billion zloty.
And of course, Brussels is also very keen on our plans for defence spending as well, so that probably will also be taken into consideration. I want to move on to Poland's public debt, which is expected to reach that 60% barrier by 2026. Some say that actually towards the end of 2025. And what is more concerning is actually that the servicing of those costs expected to reach 2.3% of GDP in 2027, which would be up from 1.8% from the previous year. I actually wanted to hear your insight as to how the government should go about servicing that debt, which is actually probably one of the harder aspects of that.
Yeah, that's first on the debt. We're talking about the debt based on the European definition, so-called ESA 2010. Of course, that reaches 60%. But based on the Polish definition, because of some funds being channeled to alternative funds in Polish promotional bank, that means that we will not reach 55%. Based on the Polish. But of course, the European definition matters because it's all about the procedure vis-à-vis the European Commission. But financing about 75 billion zloty of servicing debt is not easy. So there's a special paper for 4-year planning, how to service the debt and how to manage it. Of course, we will increase the amount of bonds issued in foreign currencies, but from about 10-15% to about 25%. So we would, issue more bonds in the US, maybe Japan, other countries as well. So in euro currency as well. So we're talking about that there would be more diversification. So maybe less of in Polish institutional investors, but maybe more foreign, I would say, to Poland, foreign institutional investors. So we're talking about maybe more diversification in terms of currency and in terms of regions that the bonds could be offered to. But of course, investors are, work on all capital markets. So the question is, who will buy those bonds? Well, based on the Fitch rating, Poland will still continue to have the same stable outlook for A minus rating, which is not bad. So we will be able to sell the bonds in the world markets. And of course, it's not good, because we have the constraints on the Polish restriction constraints or fiscal constraints. We have the European constraints, and we have a constraint in selling the bonds that would finance the Polish deficit, which will be, of course, all needs to finance the Polish deficit would be over almost 400 billion zloty. So you can imagine that every day we would have to issue about 1.5 billion zloty of new bonds.
Can you explain to our viewers perhaps why it's better to take that money abroad for us?
Well, it's not better. I'm saying it's more diversifying. And of course, you have to manage both the interest rate and currency risk. So those two risks we have to manage. So of course, it's up to the people who manage this risk to look for the opportunities. For example, now we have seen some time that Polish zloty Polish zloty appreciate versus the American dollar. But once, after the attack, what's happening in the Middle East, after the attack from Iran on Israel, we could see that the thing that overturned overnight, and the zloty start going down. And of course, the dollar, because of safe haven concept, went up. So we have to watch, pretty much, and think about what would be the best potential sale of our, national treasury bonds, based on also on the outlook on interest rates. Interest rates today is 5.75%. Those interest rates in other countries probably would go down, not in Poland. Poland has a very high inflation rate, very high interest rates. The National Bank of Poland, the Monetary Council says, the head of National Bank of Poland says, we will look at lowering the interest rate no earlier than March 2025. So altogether, we take all of it into consideration. The key is with every kind of new sources of investors, we have to look at diversification and the risk between interest rates and currency rates.
There is a government study that was actually published recently that showed that GDP growth, should it go down by 1%, then debt will approximately go up by 2% by 2028, simply because economic growth will go down. And this obviously will affect debt management for the next few years. And actually, that's very, very concerning, because looking at the figures, the deficit that we're looking at by 2025, even 2024, has never been so high in the country. So the fiscal situation here in Poland is actually very, very concerning. And obviously, given your experience as former finance minister, what do you think? What is the outlook for Poland? Because obviously the challenges that lie ahead, the general geopolitical situation is very, very challenging.
I could say every year, the deficit, not the deficit, but in terms of not relative to GDP, but just the deficit, nominal deficit, every time is higher. Now, this deficit, because it's the nature of the deficit. So you have to compare the deficit to the GDP. And the deficit to GDP next year would be is going to be 5.5% to GDP, vis-a-vis the deficit of today, which is 5.7%. So we're gradually going down, not enough, because you cannot do it overnight, because the government decided to first have a less contractionary in a view of contractionary monetary policy, wanted to have easy fiscal policy with fulfilling the promises on social spendings, increasing the military spending to 4.7%, increasing health spending to 6.5%. So all of it, has to stimulate the consumption. So the idea is to first stimulate the consumption, come up with more investments, coming also from EU funds, and accelerating the growth to about 3.9%, which would give the basis to lower the deficits in the future.
Okay. Paweł Wojciechowski, it's been great having you in the studio again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And that was the bottom line on Business Arena. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you join us again tomorrow. I was your host, Marie Cato. Goodbye.